Landscape photography is a powerful way to connect with nature, a reminder of how small we are in the vast world around us. When it comes to landscape photography in Australia, there's arguably no better place than the iconic Great Ocean Road and Otways. A Photographer's Guide to the Great Ocean Road and Otways by Samantha Olsen is a book that provides everything you need to know about 152 different shoot locations, from the best times of day to visit, the ideal seasons, tide heights, drone regulations, even whether you can bring your dog. It's your ultimate guide to photographing the Great Ocean Road and Otways safely and creatively. 4 years of research went into this book, uncovering hidden locations and determining the best and safest times to visit each one. Those of you with limited time, this book will help you make the most of every moment you have. Whether you shoot with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, or if you're planning to visit the Great Ocean Road or Otways, this book can be your essential companion. Here's what you'll find inside: 152 shoot locations, a location breakdown separated into accommodation areas for easy planning, skills for great landscape images focused on seascapes and waterfalls, weather and tidal information. With 750 pages of information and over 1,000 full-colour images and diagrams, this book is a treasure trove of knowledge. This how-to photography guide, combined with a travel guide, all in one beautifully crafted book, gives you everything you need so you don't waste a moment of your trip. So, don't miss out. Visit Kickstarter.com and search for Great Ocean Road book to get your copy today. Choose a package that includes a physical hardcover book to enjoy all the beautiful images, plus an ebook so you can take this guide with you wherever you go. Get ready to discover the Great Ocean Road like never before. Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, a podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Jeff Maltzman, an ophthalmologist and hobbyist landscape photographer, shares how photography became his escape from the intricacies of medicine. He reflects on his early adventures in New Jersey, how digital photography rekindled his creative passion after moving to Tucson, and the ways he balances his career with his artistic pursuits. He discusses his love for intimate landscapes, the ethical responsibilities of photographers in preserving nature, and the transformative power of capturing the outdoors. Through personal anecdotes and lessons learned, he offers insights into workshops, creative growth, and finding inspiration in everyday moments. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Jeff. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hey, Grant. I'm doing great tonight. Thanks very much, and thanks a lot for having me on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, same here. I'm very pleased to have you on the show. It's been something I've wanted to do for a little while, and you have been on the list for a little while. But why don't we start with who Jeff Maltzman is and why is he a landscape photographer?
Oh gosh. Okay. I would love to say, I hear people come on podcasts and talk about how they got their first camera in the womb and they've been photographing since birth and that sort of thing, and grew up in the wild. And that's not really necessarily my case, but I've always had an interest in art and nature, at least. I grew up in New Jersey, which isn't necessarily, I think in the States anyway, thought of as a particularly forested or wildernessy sort of area. But I was fortunate to grow up in a place that had a little forest right near my house. And I was a bit of a quiet, shy, loner kid. And I spent a lot of my childhood just wandering around these woods. And I just loved it. That was my youth. Every animal I could find, my poor mother should be up for sainthood. I brought every creature you could imagine home: wounded birds, the baby squirrel. One time I came home with a tent caterpillar.
Wow.
The whole thing. But I took off the tree and 10,000 caterpillars crawling over our living room shag carpet back in the 70s. It was a mess. So I've always really enjoyed nature, and I loved that time in the wild as a kid growing up. And then life goes on and you get busy and things get in the way. And I pursued a career in medicine. I'm an ophthalmologist,
Okay.
eye surgeon specializing in cataract surgery and glaucoma. surgery. And so that's a long, busy road. And
Sure.
unfortunately, as I think is fairly common in the medical world, it shuts out a lot of other pursuits. And a lot of physicians give up a lot to get where they are. And I fell into that and I started a family and had young kids. And so I drew a lot as a kid and I'd been interested in photography and I tried it a little bit along the way. I tried it in med school. And then again, when I was a resident, I bought a SLR, my first SLR camera, a Canon Elan, and I
Uh-huh.
tried shooting. I'd go out and I would give it a go. But this was the film days, and I would take a bunch of shots. And by the time I got around to developing them and reviewing them and realizing how much they sucked, it just wasn't really conducive to the learning process when I would have a chance
Sure.
to get out and do it again. And it was expensive and I had no time. And it was crash and burn after crash and burn. And then once I finished and I got my first real job out of all of my training. I moved to here, to where I am now in Tucson, Arizona, in the Sonoran
Okay.
Desert. And it was just magical to me, this place. It's stunningly beautiful and so unique, so
Yeah.
different from where I grew up, certainly in the East Coast of the US, and a really unique environment. And I just thought, this is so cool. I need to do something with this. I need to find a way to express some creativity about how I feel about this place, the hiking that I was doing and that
Sure.
sort of thing. And everything finally came together around 2009, 2010, which
Mhm.
is when I think digital photography really started to come into its own and the
Yeah, it was
cameras.
really starting to get a camera that could take a reasonable shot.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. They were finally able, they were probably starting to surpass film at that point. And I bought
yeah.
my first Canon 40D and I used some old crummy Tamron lenses that I had. Not a Tamron lens makes great lenses now, but back then they were just these cheap lenses.
Yep.
And I had this camera and this lens, and I had a polarizing filter on it that I had no idea why the polarizing filter was on it. And I went to an event to photograph my kids at a little art camp they were doing for the summer and ran into a guy who has subsequently become a good friend who was at the time a modestly avid photographer and started asking me about, oh, is that your new toy? And I said, yeah. And he said, what are you doing? Why do you have that polarizer on there? And I said, I don't know.
It's
And
there.
I said, doesn't it make the pictures prettier? I read something like that. And he said, you have no clue what you're doing, do you? And I said, no, I really don't. And he offered photography classes. So I
Awesome.
signed up for his like intro to photography class and took it. And he gave little assignments and I took them seriously. And I started doing that and I started reading. We would have these little meetings and I got really interested. And as you hear so many times, and it's a cliche, but it really lit a spark.
Yeah.
And I got so into it. I went down that rabbit hole full force. I started searching everything I could find on the internet at that point. For
Mhm.
me, at that stage, it was let's learn the technical aspects. Creativity was on the horizon, but it was I got to learn how to do this. And everything I could find on technical photography, I started buying books, understanding exposure, Brian Peterson's classic
Yeah. Yeah.
tome. And I just read and just went crazy and taught myself. And those original, a lot of those photos from early on were awful. I go back and look at them. I had no idea, but I voraciously read and just got, I think, better. And in October of 2010, I joined an Arizona Highways. I believe you spoke to Laura Zarino, my friend Laura, about Arizona
That's
Highways
right. Yeah.
magazine. We can
Her
talk more
her
about that.
episode
I'm a
actually
contributor
just
to the
came out.
magazine for the last 10 years. Yeah. But they at the time they also had a photo workshop division. They ran workshops, and I
Yep.
went to Sedona, which I imagine you're familiar with Sedona, Arizona. It's this beautiful red rock place, and it was
Yeah, I've seen it, never been there though, and unfortunately,
well,
it's one of the places that's definitely on the bucket list though.
yeah, we'll have to rectify that. We'll get you out here to come visit. It's Arizona's pretty amazing. But it was a fall color workshop in Sedona with this guy named Derek Von Briesen, who was the pro photographer. And there were probably 8, 10 of us in this group. And I was just out there doing my thing, not really thinking much of it. And Derek would come peek over our shoulders and he started paying attention to what I was doing. And he was quite complimentary. And he started sending other participants over to say, hey, go look and see what Jeff's doing over there. And that I think that helped click it for me because at the time I had no idea. Am I good at this? Do I have any aptitude for this at all? or do I
Sure.
just suck? And Derek's enthusiasm and support in that at that workshop, and we subsequently became friends, and he was really supportive of my photography and took me along with him on some trips. That really motivated me to keep going. That's a very long-winded way of explaining how I got into this. And I've just been, I'd say, really an avid photographer since. It's a passion. What's the word I'm looking for? My wife would say just a little too much at times.
It's an obsession. I
Thank you. That's the word. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is an
I know it's
obsession.
an obsession. I'm
Yeah,
happy that it's an obsession,
it's
and
all I think about, right? I'm on
yeah,
vacation somewhere. I'm anywhere I go without a camera. I'm always oh, look at that light. Oh man,
yeah, you're
hang on.
framing up a composition everywhere.
I gotta get my phone out. I gotta get this.
I was driving home from somewhere I'd been the other day and glanced out the window, and yes, there's a shot I could see. I have to go back there one day and stop and park up and take the shot. But
It's infuriating to family members and friends
absolutely,
sometimes, but you know
and
what?
if
They
you're
get
on a
used to
journey,
it
it
after a
always
while.
takes way longer than you think.
Yeah, it does.
So, do you remember that first photo you took that made you feel, okay, this is it. Things have clicked. Not necessarily I know what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm actually progressing and getting somewhere with my photography.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, it was probably on that workshop, that one I just mentioned, the Sedona one. I'd been photographing for about a year at that point, and I'd gone to the Grand Canyon a few times, which is arguably one of the most impressive places you can go and photograph. But when
Sure.
I look back at those photos from those first couple Grand Canyon trips, most of them were with family, and just I was there in bad light, and I tried to frame thing. Oh, look, I framed with the trees, but they were utterly awful of no artistic merit whatsoever. But then on that workshop in Sedona, I don't know if it was partly probably just who's the person that said if you want to take prettier photos, stand in front of prettier places or something like that. Sedona, it's a wonderful muse for landscape photography. And I guess with Derek's encouragement, I came away with several photos from that trip that I still have in my portfolio today that I still think are in my probably top 50 photos
Okay,
I've ever
wow.
made,
Yeah.
honestly, including there was one shot. Cathedral Rock is a well-known monument there in Aurelia, and there's a place where Oak Creek comes down in front of it, and there's a little side channel. It's about a meter wide that comes
Yep.
across, and it doesn't always have water flowing, but it did while we were there in this nice afternoon light. And I thought it'd be really cool if I got right down in there. And so I got down in the channel, in the water. I got soaked up to my waist, but straddled my tripod across this 1 meter thing, got real low to the water. There were a few little fall leaves, a little color along the sandstone, and shot the moving water coming down that channel.
Yeah.
And I loved that photo. I still really like that photo. And that, when I saw that, it really, that got me really excited. And as I say, that trip really cemented landscape photography for me. And it also cemented a love for water, particularly water in the desert. I
Yeah.
love photographing water, moving water, waterfalls, especially the really ephemeral water that we have here. There are very few places in southern Arizona, anyway, where there's water running perennially. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen much. There's one very special place, which I'll likely talk about later, but most of our water is come and go. And when it comes, it can be pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
so I love catching those moments and trying to do them in maybe a little bit of a different way, maybe a little more of an intimate way than perhaps some others do. At least I hope I
Yeah.
am.
Okay. Are you a planner or are you more reactive in your photography? Are you spending a lot of time with apps and studying what's going on with the weather, or do you just go out and whatever happens?
No, yeah, no, I'm pretty much a non-planner. Partly because I don't really want to be. I just think I do better work when I can be more spontaneous and just I'm a sort of you get what you get kind of guy and you just got to work with it. And if that means coming home with no photos, while at one time 10, 15 years ago I'd have been upset about that. Now it's absolutely fine with me because my primary motivation for being out there honestly is just having a good time, being in nature, enjoying where I am, having that peace and serenity. Again, my job gets pretty stressful. I love it and I love helping people see, but it's a lot
Yeah.
of work. It's that time out in nature and that time photographing is really special to me and it's very limited. I don't have the luxury. I'm not a full-time photographer. I'm not a pro. And I get a couple of days off here or there, maybe a week every now and again here to go out and plan a trip to photograph. And for me, it's kind of like photography of convenience. I'll go when I can go. Very often, when the weather is good, photographically good, I'm stuck in the office. And so I just have to go when the most I'll plan is where to go. I'll pick an area, I'll pick a location, and I'll
Sure.
do a bit of background research, obviously how to get there, how to get in and out, what do I want to see in general. But I try not to really look at too many other photographs from the place. I'm not really into photographic celibacy per se, but I just don't want to be overly influenced by other people's shots, particularly if I'm going somewhere that might be called iconic or better known. Although I try to go to places that are a little lesser known. I prefer to be alone when I photograph, away from other people.
Yeah, right.
I don't like other people around. I don't like the noise, the distraction. And I frankly don't want to shoot what everybody else is shooting. And if I do, I try to find something that not everybody else is shooting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I try to do that even if I am with other people. And
yeah,
one
for
of the
sure.
things I really like is when you've got maybe two or three people around and everyone's within, say, 10 meters of one another and they all come away with different
Yeah.
shots and I'm always looking at it going, yeah, I didn't see that.
For sure, yeah. I do occasionally photograph with friends. I'll get invited along on trips or we'll
Sure.
plan trips together, and I enjoy those. I enjoy the camaraderie. I'll often sneak off on my own and let everybody go their own way and do their own thing. But I like you, I do find that fascinating. And that's what's wonderful about art and about photography is you can put 5 people, 10 people in the same 50-foot, 100-foot stretch of forest or trail or whatever and everybody sees something different and everyone comes away with a different perspective and I love that. I love seeing what other people do and of course then there's that little just oh how did I miss that and now I can't shoot that because
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
that's yours but I'm like damn that's amazing.
Oh, sometimes I will shoot it too.
Yeah, to be fair sometimes I will too but I'll try to change it up a little bit and I won't post it because I'm like that's your shot, you go ahead and take that one. Yeah.
You talked a little bit there about how you try to fit your photography in around your busy lifestyle. And as an ophthalmologist, you're obviously going to have limited time. How do you manage that balance between work and a career, and as you said, quite a full-on career, and getting out and into nature?
Yeah, it's challenging. Truly, it really is. Years ago, and I've been photographing somewhat seriously now for about 15 years. In the first half of that time, maybe a little more than the first half of it, my kids were relatively young, grammar school, high school, going up through that. And fortunately, they liked to travel, and my wife liked to travel. And so we would take a lot of trips. I am fortunate as a partner in my medical practice. I can take off as much time as I want if I'm not there, I'm not earning any money. So I can't take off too much time, obviously, but I've
Yeah.
got a certain amount of leeway. And so if I just want to take a week of vacation every couple of few months, I can do that. And we did that a lot. When my kids would have a break, Christmas break or spring break, we would travel, whether it was somewhere in the United States, somewhere internationally. I would convince my family to go somewhere that I wanted to photograph.
Done that.
Yeah, yeah. Africa, Iceland, where else have we gone? Scotland, a few really cool places.
Yep.
And when they were gracious enough to be very supportive of what I was doing and to let me go out. And of course, in the summer, it was really easy because I'd be up at 3 in the morning to go out and shoot in the early morning light. And I'd probably be back by 8 or 8:30
Yeah.
before they even got out of bed. And so in the early years, there was that. And now that my kids are grown and they're both out of the house and off in their own lives, it's funny, I thought I would have more free time as an empty nester, so to speak. I guess I've just gained more responsibility as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
responsibility in my practice. I'm on the board of a couple organizations. So I seem to find even less time. But I just take it where I can. I'll
Yeah.
go. My wife again continues to be really supportive of what I do. She knows how important this is for my mental well-being, the
Uh,
stress of work, and my wife is not a camper. and she's not an outdoor person and she's not interested in photography. And so I invite her along all the time. She has yet to take me up on it. She really does not want to have to pee and poop in the woods, and she wants a bed and a shower. And so she just lets me go, and I'll take a weekend, maybe a month here or there, and run off. And I try to schedule maybe a week or two every year where I can run off for a week and in my truck and just go camping on my own
Yeah.
and photographing. And so it does take a certain amount of planning, and everything I do has to be, when I take these weeks off, I plan them 6 months ahead.
Yeah, right.
So I don't always plan where I'm going to go, but I have to plan the time 6 months ahead. I get the conditions, I get the weather that's coming. I try to go somewhere that I think is going to be that I want to go, that might be conducive to the what I have in mind maybe to photograph. But again, in general, in terms of my not really planning, I just try to stay open to whatever it is that I find. I am a firm believer in being able to find things to photograph anywhere in just about any conditions. Give me harsh light, I will find something to photograph. Give me flat, overcast light, I will find something to photograph. It's helpful that I tend to concentrate, I think, more on more intimate scenes nowadays. I don't care what the sky looks like. I'd say probably 75% of my photos don't have the sky in them nowadays. I purposely exclude the sky much of the time. I'm not
Yeah.
really going for that grand landscape, amazing blowing up sky kind of thing. I'll take it if it comes, don't get me wrong, but it's not really my focus.
Yeah. Yeah. How do your personal experiences or emotions influence the landscapes that you choose to photograph?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'm sure they do. I'll go out to shoot, and there are times that frankly I'm pretty melancholy, maybe down about some things. And again, that time out there is really restorative for me and really helpful.
Yeah.
But frankly, there are times where I'm just not feeling it. My emotions are such that I might not make any photos. I might not really see anything that appeals to me. On the other hand, I may see some things that are perhaps a bit moody and a little dark that kind of reflect my mood. I tend to like really strong contrasts, light and shadow, and
Sure.
I think I've probably been accused of perhaps be a little too high contrast at times. I like
I,
that look of
I
light
think
and
that's a
dark
matter of
shadows.
taste, though.
Yeah, I just like but I think it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm feeling a little lighter and airier, and I'll process images a little bit more brightly. Other
Uh-huh.
times, I think if I'm feeling a little more harsh or a little more down, I'll really go deep into those dark shadows. The old film look back when we only had,
Okay.
six, seven stops. And
Yeah.
I love some of the old photos by some of the pros like Galen Roll, who had these great shots. He was shooting with film, and a lot of it was handheld, and there were just lots of. He couldn't blow out the highlights, so you just had
Yep.
to leave the shadows black. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still like that look, and I still create
Yeah.
that look, I think, in a lot of images. It doesn't seem to be quite so popular nowadays, but I like it, especially when I'm feeling a little dark.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. A lot of people say that you've got to have some detail in your highlights, etc., etc. And I think there's sometimes these, and I don't want to call it just a trend because some of that detail can make a much more interesting photograph. But I also appreciate those dark, not completely black, but somewhat darker than the average person might look at and go, oh yeah, that's okay. And that look, I think, certainly has its place. As I said earlier, it's definitely a matter of taste, and it's not something that not everyone is going to like, but not everyone's going to all the bright colors either. You see a lot of people do that, particularly a lot of younger photographers now that have taken up film photography. And they're dealing with some of those exact issues of, okay, I've exposed okay for the highlights, but that leaves my shadows black as
Yeah.
what are you going to do? So I think it's just a matter of taste and something that people either appreciate or don't, and so be it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will exposure bracket, and I'll merge images, and I'll do some luminosity masking and things like that on occasion, though it's not something I'm particularly skilled at. And I've never really had all that much of an interest to learn, quite frankly. I don't like processing very much. I
Yeah,
try to spend as
to do
little
that, and
time on it.
I do a fair bit. You have to love processing just as much as you love being out in the field.
Yeah, no, I much prefer being out there and enjoying the nature and discovering and making the photos. And I'll just come home and I'll process relatively minimally. I'm not really a processor. And sometimes I just can't get the look that I want, that was in my mind when I took the shot.
Mm.
I'll take some photos, I'll make some photos thinking, all right, that needs to be darker there, and this, I'm going to highlight this. And sometimes I just don't have the skill in processing to create exactly what I want to create. And there are
Sure.
times where I'm frustrated with that, where I think I really need to learn to use Photoshop better and learn how to really master luminosity masks and multiple exposures and exposure blending and all that. And then
Sure.
I usually just go, nah. I'm just gonna take what I can get. And those one or two photos where I just couldn't achieve my vision, I'll just say that's the way it
That's
crumbles.
the way they came out. We talked just now about taste and about our audience. What do you hope people feel or take away when they look at your images? If they're looking at, say, your Sedona portfolio, what is it that you want them to take away?
Yeah, yeah. I hope they take away the same sense of wonder that I did in seeing these places. I hope I'm people ask, what are you doing with your photography? Are you telling a story? Is this metaphor? Are you sometimes I'm telling a story. Occasionally I will photograph something as metaphor per se, but a lot of times, quite frankly, I'm just not that deep a person. I'm a lot of times I'm just photographing something that I think is beautiful in a way that I think really highlights that. I look at what I photograph with a design sense. I'm looking for order, for harmony, for balance in the way. That's what we're all doing, right? That's the whole idea of
Yeah,
composition.
you're
You're
looking
taking a
for
3D
visual
world.
patterns and things that
Yeah,
people, hooks that people can actually grab their eyes onto and go, I recognize that, or I
yeah.
don't recognize it, so what is it?
Yeah, we're putting it in that box, and that's it. Yeah, sometimes I am trying to make people look and go, what is going on there? And some photographers are really good at that. I think you've had Alex Noriega on the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
When Alex does some really wonderful intimate landscape work that really makes you look and go, oh, that's cool. What is that? And when I can do that, and I do sometimes do that when I find those things, and I love that. I can sit there for 2 hours at a scene and just photograph it and compose in different ways and try to get it to look the way that I want it to look. But in the end, I guess I hope that people, I'm trying to share obviously my unique view of a place and what was meaningful to me and what spoke to me, what I think nature was trying to tell me. What's the story that this landscape is trying to tell, or that I think it's trying to tell? Maybe that's cheesy. But and if
I don't think so.
they don't get that, we can't control what people think when they look at our images. Someone obviously looks at it and thinks something entirely different. But I just hope they enjoy that. They enjoy what they see. I hope it gives a sense of, wow, that place is really special. And nowadays, considering the political climate that we've got going on here in my country, which you and I alluded to earlier, I would hope it inspires a sense of conservationism and the need to protect these wild and beautiful places from some of the corporate greed that is out there that just wants to mine and drill and destroy some of these places that are really our birthright as citizens of whatever country we're in. We humans, we have a need to connect with the land. We have a need for beauty. We have a need to get away from the craziness and be out in the wild. And I hope we can preserve these places. And I think that's one thing that photography can thankfully do.
Absolutely. Have you tried to put your images out there in with a conservation message at all, or is it just something that you're just saying, okay, here's the shots, this is what you could lose if you're not careful?
Yeah, no, I've not worked directly with any conservation organizations, and maybe I could look into that a little bit more. I do support
Sure.
financially and as a member a number of conservation organizations here in the US that protect our parks and the Nature Conservancy and things like that. I suppose I could try to work with them and offer some photography. Most of the time when I post, I just try to post the beauty of it all and just describe what I was experiencing there. But occasionally, in posts, and particularly certain places. I just posted something just yesterday from a place called Chiricahua National Monument, which is this really cool place with these rhyolite formations down here. And I did editorialize a little bit at the end saying that all these places are under threat nowadays. And I thanked the National Park Service and all the rangers for all they do to protect us and these spaces. So I do throw the occasional little political or conservation message in there, but I could probably do more. And I do feel compelled now with what's going on here to
Sure, sure.
look for ways to do more. I have been thinking about that a little bit. And so you asking the question is probably going to push me to do so.
Okay. Well,
I think we all perhaps could do that.
yeah, absolutely. I don't think I do it often enough. I rabbit on about it a little bit here in the podcast, but certainly when I'm
Yeah.
posting, it's not always what I'm thinking about, and therefore
Oh, sure.
I sometimes neglect it. But I certainly could do more. And as you said, giving financial support to your national parks or other organisations that are into conservation is a great way of providing something in some way to those organisations that can actually help conserve the world we live in.
Yeah, I feel a duty to do it. I've got a good job. I make a decent living. I photograph in all of these wonderful places that are protected and provided for me by these organizations or by our government. And I feel some responsibility in helping to support the places that I go and the beauty that's out there. And so, yeah, it's an important thing.
Yeah. Talking about conservation and that balance that a lot of photographers have to go through in terms of going to remote places in particular, looking for something that's very unique or a little bit hidden, how important is it that you make sure that you respect and minimize your impact on the landscape when you're out and about?
Yeah, I think that's really important. There's a group here, you've probably heard of Nature First, the Nature
Yep.
First movement, if you're familiar with that, came out of a group of photographers in the American West, including Sarah Marino, who you've had on the program, and a few others.
Yeah.
And I very much support and believe all the principles that they've come up with, excuse me, about leave no trace and being respectful for the environment, not trying to overexpose things. And so I think it's important that we as photographers set that example. We're out there, we're very visible. We obviously post photos, and for better or for worse, the things that we post on Instagram and get put out there, people pay attention to that. And so I think we need to be really good stewards of the environment and be very mindful of the impact that we're having. When I'm out photographing, again, I try to go to places where other people aren't. And so as one person just out there in the wilderness, I feel like I don't have too much of an impact. I stay on roads, I stay on trails when requested to do. I try not to disturb areas that shouldn't be disturbed. When photographing wildlife, I try very hard not to disturb the wildlife or interfere with their behavior as much as I can. I won't harm an animal to get a shot.
Yeah.
I think and those are the basic, the minimal things that we can all do. When I'm in a
Absolutely.
place photographing with a lot of other people, I try to be really respectful of everyone's needs, but I will occasionally call people out if I feel that they're treading where they shouldn't be treading or doing something that's a bit stupid or perhaps harmful to the location or frankly to themselves. We've all seen people do stupid things.
Oh, yeah.
Again, I think photographers have we've got a unique viewpoint and we have a unique responsibility in trying to educate others out there as to appropriate behavior. And I don't mean to be holier than thou. There's a lot of opinions on this, and people talk about gatekeeping. You can't tell me where to go and what I shouldn't be able to go do and what I should post. But I just think we have to be a little bit cautious about that sort of thing. There are certain locations here, for example, in the Southwest, that are like places with Native American art
Yep.
and petroglyphs and things like that that I've got a few photos of that are places that are not very well known. And I often get asked for people to tell me, hey, where is that? Can you give me directions to that place? And my answer is generally a fairly courteous, no, I can't.
Yeah.
You obviously know vaguely where it is and you know the area. I'll tell people it's in this monument or it's in this, but I'm not giving you the GPS coordinates of my tripod legs. That's not going to happen. So I
Yeah.
just think do your own research and find it on your own and be respectful of it when you get there. And I think that's how I look at it anyway.
Absolutely. And now I know it's not every canyon, and there's a lot of canyons in the places you're talking about, but I would have thought from what I've seen, that you could pick at random probably 5 places, and 4 out of those 5 will have petroglyphs in them.
There are a lot. There probably are a lot more than people realize, and there are certainly
You
known
just have
areas
to know
that
where
have
to
them.
look and
Yeah, yeah. Whether it's petroglyphs or old dwellings, the Sedona area is pretty well known to have a lot of old
absolutely. Yeah.
rock dwellings and things like that. And unfortunately, because of the proliferation of photos and influencers
Yep.
on Instagram and Facebook, these places are being destroyed. They're being systematically destroyed. There's one person, I won't name her, who is a steward of the landscape in Sedona and really tries hard to protect these places and get people not to post coordinates of
Yeah. Yeah.
things that are not on official trails. And
Yep.
she's been beat up. She's been truly beat up. People calling her all kinds of horrible things for, you're a gatekeeper. You can't tell me where to go. You have no right. Who the hell are you to say? And she's not trying to do that at all. She's just telling people be respectful. Don't write your name in Sharpie marker on the rocks. Don't
Yeah.
post the coordinates of exactly how to get to these spots that are not official trails. People can find these things on their own without, and there's one site in particular that just has become completely overrun, and
Right.
a dwelling that's probably been there for 1,000 years has been just completely knocked down and destroyed. People take, so it's a
Yeah.
shame,
I,
but
I just don't understand that mentality. Not, I get people wanting to know where these things are so they can go and get their shot for the gram. I get where that thinking comes from. I don't subscribe to it myself, but I don't get the thinking that goes along with, okay, I'm going to use a Sharpie marker here and say I was here or whatever, or starts to
yeah,
actually dismantle 1,000-year-old dwelling or granary or whatever it is that
right.
is in one of these places. And it
Yeah.
just astounds me that somebody could actually think, oh, here's a good idea, I'll take this brick home or whatever.
It makes no logical sense. It's ego and greed, and it's foolishness. It really is. One of the most ironic things I've ever seen. There's a very well-known hike called the West Fork Trail in
Yep.
Sedona. It's an absolutely beautiful hike. You've seen a million photos from there. And it was changed quite a bit by a big flood that happened after the slide fire years ago. But before the fire, you would go to the end of the maintained trail, and there was this area that we would call the subway, which was this beautiful, almost like a slot canyon, and it was submerged mostly. You'd had to wade through water up to your waist if you wanted to get in there. But then
Mm.
after the fire, it dried up and it became easier to get in there. And I went to hike in there to document what had happened after the fire. And in big, thick black permanent Sharpie marker on the red rock wall, this girl, and I know she was a girl because she signed her name to it, wrote, "Walk in Beauty, Mandy Hayes." Mandy Hayes, if you're out there, you're a moron. But black Sharpie marker on the red rock, why? Why was that? Why would you do that?
I have no
It's
idea.
just stupid and rude, and I don't know. People are dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it does take all kinds, but those kinds can
Yeah, I could do without
be,
those kind.
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
What does success look like for you in your photography?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. I
Well, I
don't
ask
know
just
that
about everybody that one.
I know you do, which is why I knew you were going to ask me. I don't know. I don't know if I have a really good answer for that. I honestly, my
It's
best
okay.
answer for that is probably if I've come home happy from the time I've spent out there. And that doesn't always mean coming home with any nice photos. I've come home from trips with complete crap, and I still feel fairly fulfilled from it. Obviously, I'm a lot happier when I come home with a few
Oh,
really
sure.
nice shots. But in the beginning, photography for me meant coming home with nice photos that I could share with people and get some oohs and ahs. And I've managed to really move beyond that. I love it when other people love what I do and when they get something out of it and when it means something to them and they can connect with it. That obviously to me is a certain degree of success. But I think really it's was I happy with it? Was I happy with the time I spent out there? That as I get older now, and those times for me, as we talked about earlier, are few, and they're very special. Those times for me to get away, probably got out for the first time in 2 or 3 months this past weekend and went and photographed these cool rock formations at two different mountain ranges here in southern Arizona. And I got a few photos. I made a few photos that I rather like and I thought were quite nice. But even if I hadn't, I had a great time. I got up early one morning, well before sunrise. I went out on the trail of this several-mile loop, and I spent the morning just slowly wandering my way through there, making some photos. Sometimes I just put the cameras away in my backpack and just slowly walked and watched the shadows move across the rocks. And I just smelled the air and felt the cool air in my face and just looked around and just thought how fortunate I am to have this time to be in this place alone. I had the entire canyon to myself. That's the one nice thing about getting up early, right? Very few people out there. It was a
Yeah.
Monday, so it was a weekday, so it wasn't very busy. And it just that was absolutely phenomenal and wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. You talked about photographing in challenging conditions and what for some people might be uninspiring light and being able to do that. How do you keep motivated when you're in those challenging conditions? What is it that keeps you going? What drives you forward when you've got yourself in a landscape and things aren't exactly how everyone would like?
Yeah, Grant, that never happens to me. And so
Okay.
it happens quite frequently, as we all know. We've all been there, right? You get out there and either the
That's a blue
conditions
sky
are,
day. There's no cloud. There's nothing happening.
yeah, there's not what you thought there was going to be. Maybe you went in
Yep.
thinking, oh, I'm going to shoot this. To some degree, like I said, I try to go out with no strong preconceived notions about what it is I'm going to photograph. Again, that's the whole no planning thing. I
Yep.
go where I want to go, where I think I'm going to be able to make images, and I do somewhat mentally plan to say, okay, I know there are going to be scenes here that if the sky does something amazing, I can be somewhere where I can get that sky with a beautiful foreground and I can create that sort of grand, if you will, grand landscape shot. But I'm
Sure.
also thinking that I know that there are places that I can go if the light stinks, if it's completely flat, or if it's really harsh and there's a lot of shadow. I'm generally aware that I can find something in that landscape to photograph in most cases that I can be happy with, or worst case scenario, if you want to call it that, I'm at the point in my life where, again, if I don't find anything to photograph, that's okay. That's
Sure.
okay. I'm just happy again to have been there. So I've stopped beating myself up about having to make a photo. I used to, I think we all did this in the beginning, right? Where
Oh,
I'm a
absolutely.
photographer, I want to be out there. And if I came home with no nice images, I was like, that sucked. That was a waste of my time. I stink. I'm a failure. And that doesn't really happen to me so much anymore. Yeah, I come home a little bummed. I'm like, I was hoping to come home with at least one or two photos and maybe something I could add to my portfolio or maybe get in the magazine. We haven't talked about the magazine and we can if you want to, certainly don't need to. But because that's a little bit of a bit of a different mindset with the
Yeah.
magazine photography. But I've learned not to beat myself up about it anymore. The photography, the photographs are not the motivation for being there as much for me anymore. I love it when I get them. And if I get something really great that just really makes me giddy and just think, oh, this is awesome. Obviously, that's a huge feather in the cap, but I can go out there and just spend a day out and have a nice time with myself, quieting my mind, getting rid of all the stress from the week, and just be out there and get into that flow of just enjoying the breeze on my face and the sunlight and yeah,
Fantastic.
so I just don't worry about it so much anymore.
Okay. What is the most challenging landscape you've tried to photograph?
Oof, honestly, probably sometimes just the desert here in winter. It
Okay.
can be extremely challenging because everything's dead. It's brown, it's
Yep.
monotone, it's the
You might get
vegetation
a splash of white.
looks like crap. So yeah, that's sometimes where the high contrast stuff and looking for certain maybe some juxtapositions of things and more intimate scenes where you can use shapes and forms and contrasts is really helpful because
Yeah.
this is definitely not a time to be shooting any sort of grand landscapes in the desert. We've had no rain for months, although today we had a little, but it goes months and months with no rain, clear blue skies, harsh light, everything's dead. The desert looks like garbage right now. On the other hand, when the summer monsoons come and the desert just explodes into green everywhere, and it can
Yeah.
be unbelievable. And the desert can be pretty challenging to photograph. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else I've been that was really tough. Now, quite frankly, probably right here at home, I find to be, and maybe I'm almost too familiar with it now that it's just, I've lost maybe a creative edge there sometimes, I feel like. But then I'll find
Chris,
something new and I'll just be like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to photograph that. I haven't seen that before.
what's your favorite spot that you've been to take a photo?
Oh, man. That is really tough. I've been, like I said, I'm not a major world traveler, but I've been to some really beautiful, cool places. I've been to Iceland 3 times. It's gotten a
Yep.
bit overrun now, but I've been to Scotland a bunch. My daughter went to university in Scotland, so I made several trips to Scotland, which I
Nice.
love the Scottish Highlands. It's just something about that landscape that I just find absolutely magical and mystical. But honestly, I think one of my very favorite places that I go back to over and over again that's become a really special spot for me right here in Arizona is this place called Aravaipa Canyon. And it's a little, we talked earlier about how there's very little perennially flowing water in the desert.
Sure.
This is one of the few places where there is. It's spring fed, so there's a creek that runs constantly. It's never dry. And because of that, it's created this beautiful little ribbon, this 12-mile long cut through the mountains with this riparian habitat that is lush and green and beautiful through much of the year when the rest of the desert is pretty trashed. And so it's a wonderful place. It's got multiple side canyons, each with slightly different geology and geography and
Yep.
different flora versus the main canyon. And it's become my little personal artistic muse. I've been back, it's on BLM land, Bureau of Land Management land. So you have to get a
Okay.
permit. And those permits, unfortunately, are getting hard to get because the place has become a lot more popular in the Instagram age.
Yeah, yeah.
I've probably been in there somewhere between 30 and 40 times over the last 10 plus years now. I've photographed it nearly every season. I'm planning to hopefully put out a book about the place one of these days. Whether I self-publish it or get someone to publish it for me is still up in the air. But I don't feel like I'm quite there yet. There's still things that I want to photograph there that I've not yet achieved and photographed. And it's a wonderfully special place. They only give out 50 permits a day total. And a lot of people don't use them when they get the permits. And many people just day hike rather than backpack and camp.
Sure, sure.
So there have been times where I've been in that canyon for 3 days and barely seen another human being.
Wow,
And
nice.
it's spectacular for just serenity and peace. And it is, to me, it's one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been. It's a really special place to me, and I love going in there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about being able to go out and not take a photo and feel comfortable with that. Can you share a story of, it could be a shoot or even just the journey, where that journey and experience was more meaningful than the final photograph?
Let me think about that one for a moment. I to think of a trip. Again, I've made so many wonderful trips, and there definitely are some of them where I've not really come home with very much. But again, I usually do manage to make some photographs that I like just about anywhere I go. I can't really, I hope it's not a cop out to say that I can't
Okay.
immediately think of anywhere I've gone where I've been just utterly disappointed that I got nothing. I've definitely gone places where I was thinking I would get one thing and had to do a complete about face and do
Mhm.
something else. Years ago, I took a trip in autumn up to the Yukon up in Canada
Okay.
and to shoot some fall color. And I guess when I went up there in my mind, because they've got these beautiful ragged mountain ranges, the Tombstone Mountains, and I had all these ideas in my head about photographing some more grand landscape type scenes with these beautiful mountain peaks, amazing alpenglow and wonderful light and all this. And it was a week of just socked in, cloudy, overcast weather. And I was a little bit disappointed for the first day or two. I was like, oh, this is really not what I was hoping it was going to be. But I managed to, and this was a bit earlier in my photographic journey before I really got into this mindset of, hey, it just doesn't matter, find something to shoot. And maybe in retrospect, and as I'm thinking about it now, it might be one of those turning points for me where I really realized I could photograph anything, anywhere. What I
Okay.
ended up doing on that trip was I shot the vast majority of my images with a 100 to 400 millimeter, zooming in on hillsides of color and patterns and the lines, the diagonals in the mountain and the tree
Yep.
line and the different colors of the tundra. And I really, quite frankly, came away from that trip with some photos that I really love, that I still really love, that I think are quite nice images. And that may be around the point that perhaps my style was changing and my focus on grand landscape and getting the amazing light. And maybe perhaps that started to change around there. Yeah.
Have you had any horror stories when you've been out in the field?
Thankfully, probably no real horror stories, nothing life or death. I've done a few stupid things.
We all
You know,
have.
I've lost a couple cameras and lenses in the drink. I photograph around water a lot, and I'm not always as attentive as I should be. So I've dropped a camera in the water and destroyed a lens. I face planted into a creek one time and destroyed a camera and a lens. Thankfully, I had good insurance on all of this.
Makes
Everything
a
got
difference.
covered. But that goes back to one of my, I know one of your questions is often what's the best advice you've received? And one great piece of advice I got from my friend Derek was he likes to say, don't walk and gawk, meaning pay the hell attention to where you're going and don't be looking out there while you're walking here. And I think I was walking and gawking.
Uh,
And this happened in that Aravaipa Canyon, the place that I love that I was telling you. One moment I was standing by the side of the creek, and the next moment I was down and slammed on my knees and face planted with the camera and the lens right into the water, banged up my knees, couldn't walk or hike for 3 months afterwards. I thought I had broken my knees. It was a miserable experience. So that was a little bit of a horror story.
Definitely a horror story.
Yeah. I went out hiking here in the desert one time, what I thought was going to be a really short hike. The weather wasn't that hot. I thought, oh, I don't need that much water. I got severely dehydrated, and the hike was far longer than I thought it was going to be. And I could have gotten into a lot of trouble. Thankfully, I managed to make it back, but that was a really stupid experience. So I've learned not to do that again. And I warn everybody that comes here to the desert, it is a very different environment from what you're used to, and you got to stay hydrated. A trip a few years ago up in Colorado, I was photographing fall color and I saw this beautiful scene and I thought I'm just going to pull off the side of the road here and take some shots. And I didn't the grass was very tall and I didn't realize that the side of the road went down at a rather steep slope. So I
Right.
turned off and started to go over, and my truck was probably at 35 degrees and about to tip over. And so I got out and I managed to write it. But I was on the verge of probably tipping my truck. And I just couldn't think how horribly awful and expensive and embarrassing that would have been to have had to explain that one to someone. But thankfully, I've never seriously injured myself. I've never damaged any major property, mine or anybody else's. I've been fortunate so far, but I've definitely done some stupid things.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you think landscape photography has shaped your relationship with the natural world, or has your relationship with the natural world shaped your landscape photography?
Probably a little bit of both. I think, again, getting into photography the way that I have, I've always, as I said, from a kid, I've always enjoyed nature. I've enjoyed being in nature. I think photography has taught me to look even closer at everything. I see the detail now that maybe I missed before. Before it was the forest, now it's the trees. So I think photography and my focus on photography has really helped me see what I've always loved with a new appreciation in a little bit of a different way. And that's been really nice, as I said. And again, it's just allowed me to be out there without having to get the shot. And perhaps that's the way that nature has influenced my photography. That love, that rekindled love of being out there and just enjoying the moment and enjoying being out alone in the quiet and the peace of nature and not feeling the need to make a photograph has probably reshaped the way I think about photography. So it's a little bit of a mutual thing in that regard.
You talked about your desire not to do too much editing. Talk to me about what you do, and are you straight into editing when you get back from a trip, or do you leave things to marinate for a while and wait and see what happens later?
Yeah, yeah. It honestly, that's one of those it depends kind of answers.
Sure, sure.
If I'm out there shooting just to be out there shooting, if I'm doing my thing where I'm just going out to get what I get and enjoy the day, and those times I'll usually come home and let it marinate. I might download the images just to make sure they're off the memory cards and in my computer and properly backed up. I'll usually do that within a day or two. But sometimes I'll leave them for weeks or even a month before I get around to editing them. And part of it is just that I don't have time. And part of it is also that I think sometimes it's good to put a little emotional distance from the experience to the photos.
Yep.
I find that sometimes I like things differently when I look at them immediately after I've been there from when I look at them a bit later when I'm a little more distanced and the memory is a little further out from the experience. On the other hand, sometimes I do have to go out to photograph specifically for the magazine. I know Laura told you about Arizona Highways. It's a magazine that was started. They're actually having their 100th anniversary this year, next month, I believe, as a matter of fact. And so 100 years of Arizona Highways. And like similar magazines in other states in the US, it was put out as a kind of a tourist attraction. It was, hey, come to Arizona. It was to promote tourism in Arizona, but it quickly developed into a venue for some really high quality photography. People like Ansel Adams and Joseph Munch and Ed Weston, and some of the greats way back in the day, they all published in Arizona Highways. So the magazine has this amazing tradition of photography. And I've been really honored, like Laura Zarino told you, she has. I published my first image in that magazine in August of 20. So I'm
Okay.
going on 10 years now of working with the magazine, and I love working with the magazine. It's a wonderful experience. It's a great way to share my passion with the world. I mean, the magazine's got a distribution in internationally and in countries all over the world, and they will occasionally send me on an assignment for a hike of the month or a scenic drive of the month, and so those I do have to do a little bit of planning.
Yeah, sure.
I know what the magazine wants. I know the general style of photos they're looking for. I have more of a plan in mind for those, and usually a deadline. So
Yeah,
those I will come home and I'll rush to prepare them and edit them and get them uploaded to the editorial staff so they can do what they have to do. But when I'm photographing for me, which is a totally different mindset, and sometimes I'll try to do both side by side, but I frankly find that kind of challenging.
yeah,
Hard to flip that switch of go from slightly more editorial and a little more photos for mass consumption to the more subjective photography that maybe I want to do for me that maybe isn't going to appeal to everyone and isn't going to get that many likes on Instagram.
yep, yep. Have you ever struggled to find inspiration with your photography? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I do at times. I think we all do. I suspect anyone who would say no to that question is probably lying. But it's a tough one. I think we all go through what we might call creative blocks from
Yep,
time to time. And as I've said, again, there are definitely times where I've gone out to photograph, sometimes with something in mind, sometimes with nothing in mind. And I just get out there and I just find that I'm really not inspired. I've gone out planning to photograph, wanting to photograph, but never even taking the camera out of the bag. I just find I'll be there and I'll be in a mood and I'll just think, I'm just enjoying the hike. I'm not, I don't know, I'm sad or I'm stressed out. And I don't feel like making photographs today. I just
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
want to be here and enjoy. And again, 10 years ago, that probably would have stressed me out. Now I just chalk it up to that's life. There are going to be other days. I'm going to get out there again. It doesn't bug me so much. There are other times where I find myself getting into a little bit of that imposter syndrome thing, where I find myself
yep,
comparing myself. I see what some of my colleagues, I'll call colleagues, friends, photographers, some that I know, some that I don't know. There's so much photography out there nowadays, and there's so much amazing photography out there. Every day I find someone new that I'm just like, blown away by their work. And every
yep,
time I see someone new producing these amazing photos, it makes me look at my own work and I go, oh my gosh, I suck. Why am I doing this? These people are so much better than I am at this. And then I get into that tailspin, and that sometimes is a little, that can be creatively stymieing. And I struggle to get out of that sometimes but I just remind myself that we're all different and everybody's got a different style, a different approach, a different aesthetic. And then I'll post something on Instagram, a bunch of people pop on and say, "Oh, that's beautiful. I love that." And okay, I'm okay. I can do this. It's all
That's
right.
it. Yeah. I I I do think comparison is the thief of joy. I think comparison can be an important way of learning and helping you see where your photography is at compared to others. But comparing it always to others and putting yourself down and saying that it's no good, what I'm doing is just not good enough, is not necessarily. It can be a way of giving yourself a kick in the pants and getting you
Yeah, absolutely.
trying something different. But I prefer to compare what I've done in the past to what I'm doing now. And if I'm comfortable that there's been progress, then I'm fairly comfortable with that. It really is as simple as that. If you want to be happy in your photography, compare yourself against where you were 5, 10 years ago. And if you haven't improved, then you've got a problem.
I agree with you 100%.
Go,
And
go,
that,
go and
that's,
go and find help. Go and find somebody that will
yeah, yeah.
help teach you some of the skills that you might need, because it might be a skills, it might be a creative thing. Some people see the world differently, and therefore it's about finding your niche and finding your way through those creative obstacles that you put in your own way.
Absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. Judging against your past self. Are you growing? Are you learning new things? Are you experimenting? Try and that's where when I look at other people's work and when I find something new that fascinates me or that I can take joy in what they've done, I try to use that for inspiration to consider something new, to look at things from a different perspective
Absolutely.
than I normally would. And that's where I tend to go with that nowadays. So I definitely find myself falling into that pit of despair much less than I used to. And again, like I said, just it's taken a while, but after 15 years of doing this and now at almost 56 years old, I've learned to forgive myself a bit more and just realize that comes and it goes. You can't always just turn it on and turn it. And when you
That's
want it
it.
to, I'm going to be inspired when I'm inspired. And if I'm not, as I said, if I come home with nothing, if I went out and nothing inspired me to make a photograph that day, it's all right. There are going to be other days. I wish I had more time for it.
Sure, sure.
When I hear some of the folks who are full-time photographers talk about, I can spend 2 or 3 weeks in a place and I can, if I don't get the shot today, I'll get the shot tomorrow. If I don't get it tomorrow, I'll get it next week. I
Yeah,
don't have that luxury. And so that can be a bit frustrating at times. But again, I also don't have the pressure of making a living from my photography. And I recognize from many of my friends who are full-time professional photographers, that is their livelihood. They've got to produce, they've got to perform, at least to a certain degree.
that's
I
it.
don't. I have absolutely no need to make a photo. I can go 2 years without making a meaningful photograph. It's not going to affect me financially in any significant way. And so
Yeah,
that's somewhat freeing, knowing that I don't. I'll be honest, when I love shooting for Arizona Highways, as I said, I love being in the magazine. I don't always love the assignments. I don't love being forced to go somewhere and have to come
yeah.
home
You have to
with
go there and you
photos.
have to come back with
Yeah,
something
I
that is
know
going
I've,
to
I've
be
got maybe
printed.
one chance to go, and I've got to come home with publishable images. And if I don't, I've let these people down.
Yeah,
That's a lot of stress. I
absolutely.
like it so much better when I can just go out and go, if I get a shot, I get a shot. If I don't, it was a nice day out in the park.
It does make a big difference when
Oh, hell yeah.
when that pressure is there. Yeah. What do you see as the future of photography?
Yeah. I'm not sure that I know. We all see photography has advanced quite a bit in its 100 plus years of being around. And technology is changing so rapidly now. It's a little hard. I wouldn't have predicted some of the things we have now 10 years ago. I think it's a little bit hard to know where things are going, but I do think that the art of making images, of creating images of the natural world is it's just a human, I think it's a human urge, a human need. We're always going to want to image what we see out there and share that with people. And we're always going to find a way to do that. The camera is just a tool. The tools are getting more sophisticated. They're able to do things. We can do things with photography we couldn't do 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the dynamic range of film was 7 stops. Now we've got cameras that can shoot 16, 17 stops. Ansel Adams would have been blown away by that. And mediums are changing. Who knows? Maybe photography is going 3D or holographic, or I don't know what's coming. We'll probably try whatever it is, and technology advances, but it's a sign of the times. And then, of course, we've got AI. And I know you've delved into AI with some of your other, it's becoming more and more of a hot topic. And I haven't used it very much. I'm not very knowledgeable about what it can do. I've purposely tried to avoid it. The most AI I use is content aware remove. I'll remove a few distracting things from a photo, and I am, quite frankly, utterly amazed by what Photoshop and Lightroom can remove from an image and create a fairly seamless image of what was there behind what I removed. It is amazing technology, and I imagine it's just going to keep getting better and better, but it certainly does create some ethical and challenging conundrums of how do we use this tool responsibly, and where does it go from being my art to the computer's art? And these are way bigger questions than my puny brain can wrap itself around, and far smarter people than I are going to answer that. But we already see it becoming controversial. And so, yeah, I don't know. But wherever photography is going, at least for the immediate future, I plan on following it. So we'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned the best piece of advice you got, which is don't walk and gawk. What's the worst piece of advice?
That's one of them. Trying to think what other good advice or bad or worst piece of advice I've gotten. I think, like I said, best, don't walk and gawk. And frankly, slow down is probably one of the best pieces of advice a fellow senior seasoned photographer gave me one time. He said, Maltzman, you're all over the place. You're 1 minute you're here, 1 minute you're there. You're looking around too much. He said, just slow down, stay in one place for a second. And I took that to heart. And that was probably one of the big pieces of advice that really changed the way I looked at photography and kind of changed my style and got me really to start looking more at the details than just the big scenes. So that was pretty important. You said bad advice.
Yeah.
Probably, I've definitely had some people occasionally say things like, "Oh, there's nothing there. Nothing to shoot there. That place is useless, or that's worthless." Stupid advice. I am absolutely of the belief that there is something to be found to shoot pretty much anywhere. May not be what you wanted. It may not be what you planned on. But again, I think that goes into back to the advice, just be open to what you find where you are. I really do think that. So I think that advice of, oh, don't go there. You're not going to be able to get any good photos there. Oh, the light already stinks. Don't bother with that. That's dumb advice. That's bad advice.
Yeah. I think the worst advice I ever got was try not to shoot in bad light. No, like you, I don't believe bad light exists.
Yeah, I know, I'm with you. I agree.
Maybe the complete absence of it.
Well, that's true. Although with cameras that can shoot reasonably cleanly at 51,000 ISO, maybe not so much.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I would say there's no bad light. There's challenging light.
Absolutely.
You definitely have
light that is difficult to shoot in. Absolutely.
But yeah, that's ultimately, that's what we're photographing. We're photographing light.
That's right.
As long as there's some light, you can find some way to use it to create a photograph.
Absolutely. I've only got a couple more questions for you. The first is, are there any photographers out there that you think I should be talking to?
Yeah, I tried to go through your list of who you've already seen, and you've definitely spoken to some really great people, including some that I would have recommended. So I'm gonna give you a few names. A few of them are local people, friends of mine, people that I admire that I think might have something interesting to say, and then a couple other folks that I don't know personally, but who I like. So here locally in town, I know you had Lori Grace Bailey on early on, talking about lightning photography and all that stuff. And you've had a few people talking about storm photography. But one of my buddies here who I became friendly with early on in my photographic journey is Greg McCown is his name. And I don't know if you've heard Greg's name come up. He knows Lori very well. They often are out. He's a major storm chaser.
Yep.
He does absolutely spectacular work photographing the Arizona monsoons, the storm chases through the middle of the Americas. And he also has a penchant for really capturing some spectacular Arizona sunrises and sunsets and some astrophotography. He does a bit of all of that sort of niche photography, and he's frustratingly good at all of it. And so I really like what Greg does, and he's just a fun guy to talk to. So I think he might be fun on the show. You've had Sean Parker's name has come up to you, I know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think you've spoken to Sean, but
Not as
Sean,
yet. No, he's still on my list.
yeah, he's a really big astro night sky photographer who's found a tremendous amount of success. He's got a lot of followers on social media. He's got deals with industry. He's worked with LG and Sony and some of the companies out there, and he's done commercial stuff for them.
Yep.
Super young guy, super nice guy, teaches workshops. Sean's a really cool guy, and I think he'd be fun to have on the show. These are people I'd like to see interviewed on the show. Another guy here a guy named Adam Shalau. Adam has been artist in residence at the Grand Canyon twice. Adam pretty much, I won't say completely limits, but the vast majority of Adam's photography is Grand Canyon photography.
Right.
And on the one hand, you can say, oh, somebody only photographs one place. Isn't that kind of limiting? But Adam approaches the Grand Canyon from so many different angles, literally and subjectively. And I just think he's got this incredible knowledge of this amazing place from the rim, from the river, from the side canyons, and he's also a really
such a
interesting
big
guy.
location
An
as well.
interesting life. What's that?
I said it's such a big location as well.
Oh, it's huge.
So many places and little tributaries and side canyons and everything.
Absolutely.
I think you could make a career well and truly out of that and still not even scratch the surface.
And I think Adam would agree with you on that. It's absolutely, there's a reason it's called, the Grand Canyon. It's amazing. And yeah, but Adam does it justice. And I think if you're interested in that topic and that sort of a person who's spent his entire photographic career really focusing on becoming an expert at one place, a big place and a diverse place, but one place, I think that could be really cool.
Yeah.
And then one of my personal mentors is a guy named Carrick James. And Carrick is one of the kindest, most sharing photographer, full-time professional photographer. He's one of the few people I know who, from college, trained as a photographer, has spent an entire career as a professional photographer, primarily focusing on travel and adventure photography. So he's got a huge portfolio of images from all over the world, and he is the kindest, nicest guy you could meet. And he's the only one I actually asked if he would want to be on a podcast, and he said he would love to. So he's queued up for you if you want to go there.
Awesome.
And then, if I may, two people whose work who I don't think you've interviewed yet. One is, who I believe has been mentioned to you, is Charlotte Gibb. I don't think Charlotte's been on the podcast, has she?
Not as yet, no. Again, she's been on the list for a little while. I just haven't gotten around to contacting her and getting her on the show.
Yeah, she does a lot of intimate landscapes, and she had a previous career as a graphic designer. So she comes to everything with a very strong sense of design and using design elements. And she's the only person, I'm sure there are others out there, but she's the only person I've seen on her website. When you go to look at her portfolio, there's a giant color disc, and you can pick a color and up will pop photos of her portfolio that are primarily in that hue. Yeah. I just think that's really fun. But she's a very good photographer, and I admire her work a lot, and I've taken a lot from her. And the other one is a guy from Spain by the name of Cesar Llaneza.
Okay.
And Cesar is up in the Asturias region on the northern coast of Spain. And I think you'd like his work because he does a lot to do with the sea and the ocean and seascapes. And it's a very rocky, craggy coast up there in northern Spain. And he again, a lot of real intimate landscapes, just some really creative and beautiful work. And I came across Cesar years ago, and I spent like hours looking through his portfolio of images, just amazed by what he was doing with a camera. And I love his work. So I'd love to hear from him and what motivates him, what inspires him, and all the questions that you ask. So I could give you 20 other people, but we don't have time for that. So
all right, thank you for those.
I'll send you all their names in an email, of course, and give you all the info.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
My last question is one that I've still haven't got to the bottom of, but I still haven't yet done the count up of how many people are for and against.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's obvious you've listened to a few episodes.
I sadly know where you're going here. Yeah, yeah.
Do you like pineapple on pizza? It doesn't sound like you do.
Grant, no, it's just wrong. It's a true travesty. And
Okay.
knowing that you were going to ask this question, I looked this up. I was very curious to see if there was any word out of Italy as to whether or not this was appropriate or not. And unfortunately, it turns out there is no legal prohibition in Italy or no guidance from the Italian government or any of the big pizza societies. But I did come across this from one guy who wrote on the internet, and I quote, this is from a guy named Skuli Sigurdsson. He said, the prohibition of pineapple on pizza is just Kogan's, an international legal norm from which no derogation is allowed. It is considered a barbaric practice that violates the very essence of morality, humanity, culinary dignity of all peoples, and good taste. I agree wholeheartedly with Scully. He's correct. There
Fair
should
enough.
never be pineapple on pizza. Never.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Jeff. I've really had a fantastic time talking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Where can people
Oh,
find your work?
I had a blast, Grant. Thanks so much. I feel like I probably talked too much and didn't shut up at times and let you get
No,
too many
my
words.
guests cannot talk too much. Means I,
But
I do a lot less.
my work, you can find me. I've got a website that I routinely update every 2 to 3 years or something along those lines. Just www.jeffmaltzman.com or jeffmaltzmanphoto.com will get you there. And then Instagram, Jeff_Maltzman_photo.
Yep.
I'm on Facebook, and Instagram automatically dumps the photos to Facebook, but I don't go on Facebook or ever look at it. So I am on Facebook if you prefer Facebook over Instagram. I was never a tweeter. I'm not on Twitter. And I love what you gave a comment recently on one of your podcasts about you not being on Twitter because the owner is a Nazi or something like that. Which,
Very much
if ever
so.
there was a reason not to be on X, that would be it. So no, I'm not on X, formerly known as Twitter, and I never plan to be.
I don't own a Tesla and do not support very much of what he's doing in any way, shape, or form.
Nor do I. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Grant. This has been a blast.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast on grantswinburne.com. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.